Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into this, when you started writing, where the inspiration came from, kind of that whole beginning journey thing?
Yeah, for sure. So I've been writing I've been writing since I was a kid, basically. But in terms of kind of trying to go pro, I probably started kind of grinding away at that around 2017. And back then I was actually writing novels and querying. And it ended up, I did okay, I think, in terms of getting in touch with agents, and I was getting some fairly good feedback from them as well, which was a big motivator for me. Um, but I think I kind of hit a point where I just wasn't sure whether the trad industry was going to give me what I wanted, which was the ability to, I guess, be in control of the art that I was making to the fullest capacity. So I ended up making the decision to go indie, partly inspired by, the big inspiration for me was Ryan Carill, who I was reading kind of back when his second book came out, which was Of Darkness and Light. And around that time, I also kind of, reached out to him, joined his beta reading list, and started to learn a lot, I think, about how, what his process was like, and listening to him talk on interviews and things. Um, it was a really good look at the benefits of indie. And that's when I started to kind of open my own mind up to reading more indie as well. Um, and I guess kind of from there, around 2019, 2020, obviously COVID came. My muse, so to speak, hit a wall for probably a good year, but I got back into it in 2021, and then I wrote my current series in 2023. So I wrote another couple books before that that kind of just didn't really work. And then the book that's coming out this September, I wrote last year, punched it out in about 8 months, and now it's going through some pretty hefty edit rounds. But it's as it stands, it's in a really really good place. So I'm just excited. Like I feel like I'm in control. It's obviously very busy. Like you're wearing a lot of hats,
Hmm.
but at the same time, if you look at it as a benefit rather than, oh, I'm wearing a lot of hats, then there's actually a lot to kind of reap from the process.
Yeah, yeah. That's my wife and I are small business owners, so yeah, I totally get that. Like the small hat, you're wearing a ton of hats, but it's like that's a benefit. I mean, it can be a lot and it can feel like a lot, but it's definitely in the long run, I think, of a benefit. And what you're talking about too is like, I think that's probably the number one thing I've heard from everyone I've talked to is
Mm.
just being in control of what they're creating. And, a lot of them, like you said, like did kind of went down the traditional path and then were like, didn't like that they weren't in control of as much as they wanted to be. And so, yeah, I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I think like it's one of those tricky things where, trad still has a lot to offer people, but it's a mindset thing. Like for me, I think I prioritize the amount of control that I've got over my art more than, I guess the alternative mindset, which is like I'd like to sit at home and write and let everyone else do all the other stuff for me. I think I'm just too much of a control freak to let that stuff go.
Right.
Things like being in control of my cover art or the way that I format or how I choose to distribute and things like that. That stuff is important to me nearly as much as the actual story itself.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of why it's worked out that way. But I think obviously both kind of takes are valid, and both paths are really viable for people if they're willing to put the time and the energy into it.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it just depends on who you are. I think for me, like I'm like you a lot where it's like I like being in control of the whole creative process, especially cuz like I don't know about you, but I do a lot of things. Like I edit videos, I like to do some graphic design. So not that I'm necessarily like amazing at any of those things per se, but I just like to have some amount of control over it, I guess.
Oh, I completely get that. I'm a bit of a hobby freak as well. So
Yeah,
I've been brewing beer for about 10 years, and that's a really big hobby of mine.
that's
And it's
awesome.
good because it kind of engages the scientific part of my brain, which is a
Hmm.
great way to change things up from writing. But I'm also a musician, and I've done that kind of for years as well,
Yeah.
audio production and songwriting and stuff. So like these kind of facets of my mind just don't lend themselves to people jumping in and kind of speaking over the top a little bit. I mean, yeah. So yeah, I get it. I completely
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah, my wife calls it creative ADD is what she says I have.
Yeah,
So I'm just
yeah,
like my first response whenever I'm like, I need to get a cover artist, I need to get a this, I need to do that, is like, well, I can try that. Like that's always my first
yeah.
response. But like you, I'm also a musician. That's kind of where I did the whole music thing for a really long time and still do a little bit. Um,
Nice.
so that's always been like if I was ever like, I want to put a little soundtrack together, but like, well, I can write the themes
Yeah.
to that and like, you know. So yeah, I'm with you 100%.